All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending. This is our Exit Planning Institute webinar, The Overlooked Leg of the Stool, Why Post-Exit Success is the Key to Complete an Exit Plan. I'm Ryan Belt. Some of you may know me. I'm the Partner Success / Account Manager here at EPI. I'm excited to have you join us for this session. This webinar is eligible for 1 hour of EPI CE hours. For those of you who are Credentialed Plus members, you also have exclusive access to this webinar replay. So feel free to revisit the content in the Member Center resources. And as always, we're going to wrap up today's session with a Q&A segment. So please submit your questions using the Q&A box. We're going to try to get to as many as possible. If we don't get to all of them, we'll send them to Jerome afterwards. He can maybe reach out personally to answer those questions. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Jerome Myers. Jerome is a visionary entrepreneur, investor, and podcast host. He's dedicated to helping founders navigate the personal and psychological challenges of business exits. You can learn more about him at his LinkedIn profile. Today, Jerome will be diving into the often overlooked dimension of exit planning, personal readiness. So while financial and business value planning are critical, post-exit success is equally important, and Jerome will walk us through the emotional and psychological challenges founders face after selling their business. It's a phenomenon known as the founder's exit paradox. So in this session, you'll gain actionable frameworks, including the N.E.X.T model to help clients align their life, purpose, and legacy post-exit. Whether you're a SEPA advisor or consultant, mastering this overlooked dimension will dramatically elevate the quality and completeness of your client outcomes. So we're very thrilled to have Jerome with us today. Apologies just ahead of time. The slides are Google Doc and they just didn't format as much as we would have liked. So apologies for that, but Jerome's got some wonderful information here. So without further ado, let's dive in. Jerome, feel free to take it away.
Man, thank you so much for having me. I'd like to give value right up front. And so if anybody out there and they want to have a triggering event, something that doesn't require any work for them, hit the Scan Me with your phone and you'll be able to check out our exit readiness assessment. It's about 25 questions. It takes 10 minutes to do it, and it explores the 7 essential dimensions of an exit. This includes a personal plan in which most people skip over. And what you'll get after that is complete is a readiness score, a report with some action items, and if somebody wants it, a complimentary review call, whether that's with our team, if they've got some stuff on the personal side that they want to explore, or with you, we'll forward that information to you if we know that they're your client. And so either hit the Scan Me with your phone or it's exittoexcellence.com/ERA. And hopefully that is worth the price of admission for you all being here today. All right. So we're going to talk about the overlooked leg of the stool. And we want to talk about why post-exit fulfillment is the key to a complete exit plan. And complete is the operative word in that entire title. I think a lot of folks have been building two-legged stools. The only thing with that is those aren't stable. And I think many of us do the two-legged stools because those are much easier to manage. I'd be remiss if I didn't start by thanking folks, right? Like, I'm here because people advocated for me. So Justin Goodbread, Joe Grunfield, Renee Russo, Amy Wirsch, Julie Keys, I really appreciate you guys talking to the folks at EPI and allowing them to be aware or helping them become aware of what the work that we've been doing and encouraging them to allow us to share what we've done. I also want to thank Scott. I got to hang out with him all weekend at the Drive Value launch. I'll call it a launch party, but we were at a NASCAR race. Just one of the most amazing events that I've ever been to. Such an elevated experience, from the hotel to the transportation to the police escorts to the food at the tent to the networking. Just one of the greatest experiences I've had. And I also got to spend some time with Chris. We were down in the pits together and looking through the garages, and we got to look at the car, which I've never actually spent time with anybody who had their company name on a NASCAR. And when we were looking through the roster or the register of all the sponsors, you have folks in there like Dollar Tree, DeWalt Tools, just some really large companies. And right in there was drivevalue.com. So really amazing experience, and so grateful that I had the opportunity to participate in that. And this actually plays into personal planning. And, you know, I've got 3 hours of content that I'm gonna do in 35 or 40 minutes. If I can get that done, I will put a bow on it and explain to you guys why this is a step of the folks that run EPI moving into the personal planning space for themselves. And so I like to get a few things out of the way right off the bat. The first thing is that 100% of founders will exit. I usually do these in a workshop format. And so we're having a conversation and I invite the people in the audience to argue with me. I invite them to argue with me and tell me that this isn't true. And so since you guys can't argue with me today, I'm going to assume that you agree with me that 100% of founders will exit. The other thing I say is that there's 3 ways to get out. You either sell it, give it away, or close it. My preference is that you sell it, because if you don't sell it, then you don't get the liquidity event that I think every founder is entitled to once they build a enterprise of meaningful value. The other 2, I think, are good, but the superior one, the one where you actually have the ability to grow your wealth, is selling it. And that's why we're all in this business. I think the majority of us are focused on helping our clients sell. And before that, many of us want to do value acceleration and we want to do some financial planning. If we're advisors, I know about 80% of the CEPers are wealth managers. And so you're looking to get some A. It's really difficult to do that if people give away their business or close it. Wells Fargo has been quoted saying that 75% of business owners regret selling it. And I think that's a stat that's pretty well accepted in the CEPA community. But I don't think many people ask why. I think they just acknowledge that and say, hey, well, you need an exit plan, because if you have an exit plan, then you're less likely to regret it. And I want to go a little bit deeper on that. And so I started doing some research and I came up with some reasons why people regret selling or exiting. Loss of identity. They have a void in their purpose, isolation from a growth standpoint, relationship strain, boredom, loss of status, lack of direction, and health decline. The thing that was very peculiar to me was that none of those have anything to do with money. And I know there was a survey out there that said a lot of people feel like they left money on the table, but I don't believe that is the reason why they regret their exit. I think they regret their exits for all of these other things, because here's the thing, money is a tool. And so you could put more tools in the tool shed. As an advisor, you can continue to grow the A, right? But the money is valuable once you put the tool to work, right? Having a drill isn't valuable. What's valuable is the hole that the drill can make, or the screw that the drill can put in so that you can hang the picture on the wall and get the actual outcome. And so as we dig deeper into this, I think you'll see that there's a huge opportunity that's being missed for actually delivering real value to your client, and not value from a monetary standpoint, which is probably one of the easiest things to measure, but value from the standpoint of quality of life. And so what the side is supposed to say, so why does everyone focus on liquidity pre-transaction? I think there's a lot of reasons to do it, and I don't fault anybody who does. It's easy to measure or quantify. You have a perception of success. Hey, we got this valuation for our client. We improved the multiple for our client, et cetera, et cetera. For many advisors, your compensation is tied to it. You got to get to the transaction, and you're taking a percent of the value of the transaction. And for some folks, and I don't know how many are out there, because this is actually a new thought for me, many people believe that the owner is ready. They just assume that the owner got ready because they said they wanted to exit their business. Now, we do all these things to get the business ready to exit, but as advisors, most of us aren't doing anything to get the owner ready. And this is what personal planning is at its base. And so my question, and this is actually a newer concept for us, is, are we exit planners or wedding planners? Right? Many people that I talk to are saying, I just need to get them to sign. I just need to get them to say I do with whoever is trying to buy the business. And when I think about that, I wonder, from a standard of care, are we doing our clients an injustice? We know that after the transaction, they're going to spend a lot of their life trying to figure out what to do if they don't have a plan. And most founders don't have a plan past grandkids, gardening, and golf. And while that might work during the honeymoon phase of the post-exit cycle, it doesn't work long term. And so there have been founders who have exited for what they wanted to or more, and then been upset with the advisor for doing that for them. Instead of it happening for them, though, they say, "Why'd you do this to me? Why'd you convince me to sell my business? Why'd you take my purpose away? Why?" And the reality is, all of that could be avoided if we were doing a complete plan, one that actually includes personal planning. And so many advisors I know say, "Hey, look, man, that's not my problem," right? Like my goal is to get them as much money as possible. And if they have enough money, they'll figure it out. And so Maslow's hierarchy of needs is pretty well accepted. And so we went here, right? A lot of what we try to do is evidence-based, right? Proved through research. And so we went through at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and said, well, how many of these levels, there's 5 levels here, can be fixed with money? And what we realized was only two of them could, the bottom 2, right? Love and belonging, self-esteem, and self-actualization have absolutely nothing to do with money. And these are the problems that people who are financially free, independent, work optional, that's what these people are trying to figure out, because they solve the money problem. They don't worry about the basic needs. They're not worried about safety and security, unless they're worried about losing their money. But even that isn't something that money's going to fix, right? So love and belonging, self-esteem, and self-actualization are the things that people are struggling with when they come to the space of being work optional, meaning they had a successful exit. Some people may say, hey, they're a decamillionaire or more, as my Justin Goodbread says. And then there's another one on top of this, which is transcendence. But if we just stick with the 5, just remember, money only solves the bottom 2 levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And there's 3 to 4 more that they need to worry about, deal with. And they've got more time, money, and talent than they've ever had in order to deal with that. So it's my belief or my suggestion that we're trying to solve post-exit problems with pre-exit thinking, right? If we know that our clients are going to be dealing with levels 3, 4, and 5 of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we're working on levels 1 and 2, which are the things that everybody focuses on pre-exit because they're trying to solve a money problem, we need to adjust, shift our thinking. And so the question that I love to ask a founder when they get ready to exit is, hey, what are you optimizing for? Are you optimizing for making as much money as possible? Or are you optimizing for post-exit fulfillment? Because I believe that post-exit fulfillment is superior to money. And I believe that you can take the money, the tools that you have, right, your time, talent, and your treasures, and invest those, be fiduciary of those resources, and allocate them in a way where you create a legacy that far exceeds whatever you were able to accomplish as a business person. And so, all right, great. Forget all that, Jerome. We just need to get them to say, I do. So what happens when your clients exit, but they aren't ready? Because I think many people do this. Hey, Jerome, like my business is to get the business ready for the client, right? So that they can exit. It's on somebody else to help the client exit. All right, great. So now you max the valuation. The client doesn't have a post-exit plan for themselves personally. They walk out the door. And I like to humbly submit to you that it's like having a head-on accident, right? These are pictures from a head-on accident I had about 20 years ago. And bones broken. But at the end of the day, if you go from 60 hours a week, 40 hours a week to 0 hours a week, things are going to break. And it's probably not just your body, because health's a part of the consideration, but it's probably your self-image, your relationships, and a few other things that we call the centers of doubt. So what I would like to submit to you is that most founders are unknowingly heading towards a head-on collision with the emotional and psychological challenges of exiting their business, and they don't know it. They don't know that it's coming. And I think it's our responsibility as advisors, our responsibility as consultants, our responsibility as the person that they're counting on and trusting to guide them to a successful exit, to make them aware that there is something looming, something called the founder's exit paradox. The founder's exit paradox is what happens when the founder decouples their identity from the business identity. If you think about it, and we were working with a group where the guy had been in the business for 47 years. He's having a really, really tough time unraveling his identity. And in fact, when he starts to move on to his next, he often comes back and says, hey, my reputation, my name, I got to make sure that this part of the acquisition, the integration goes well. And so we came up with this term a few years ago, and it's really got some traction. And you're like, well, what's the paradox, or why the paradox? Well, the fact of the matter is everybody expects a founder to be really happy because in essence, they won the lottery, right? They have more zeros in their bank account than they've ever had at one time, bar none, right? And so why wouldn't you be happy if you've got more money than you've ever had? Why wouldn't you be happy if you have more time than you ever had? And the fact of the matter is they lost something and they feel sad. And many of them are uncomfortable saying that they feel those feelings. And so I was at a business conference and there was a guy speaking, and we'll talk about him in a little bit. But after that conference, I went and I did some research because he told me he was stuck. And I said, okay, so what research is out there? Like, who's actually solving this problem? And I found this Harvard Business Review article from September of 2015. And it says, congratulations on selling your business. A longtime mentor said the day after I signed the paperwork. Now get ready for a depression. Now, think about it, man. You spend 20 years, 30, 40, 50 years building something only to be welcomed with depression on the backside of it. Like, to me, that's a catastrophe. Like, that's a disaster. And I don't think any of the talented founders that are out there deserve to have that experience. And so I suspect there are some people on this webinar who have seen someone crash and burn after their exit. And usually I want the chat going crazy and people telling me, yeah, I know. Well, I've done enough of these talks, whether it was in Sri Lanka or at MIT or here locally, and every room says the same thing. I know somebody and they blew up their life. And when I went through some of the exits I've gone through, I've had plenty of collateral damage as a result of it. And so this was a video, and I'm not sure that it's going to play today, but this is a video from a business conference. The guy in the front of the room was given a 7-step plan for a double unicorn exit. Precocious, but we'll roll with it. And so he's going through his presentation. It's about an hour and 20 minutes long. And about 57 minutes in, he says, and I was drinking and thinking. And so I got up and told my wife I was getting ready to go to In-N-Out Burger to pick up something to eat. She told me to pick up a job application while I was there. I looked at her kind of confused because I'm the guy that just sold for $2 billion. Why would I need to get a job application from In-N-Out Burger? And she went on to tell me that, hey, I know when you have a stimulating conversation related to business, but right now you're just sad panda. You're not doing anything. We need to get you moving. And she went on to say, hey, I think you're having an existential crisis. So I got stuck at 57 minutes. He said whatever he said for the rest of the presentation. And then they passed the mic around and I said, hey, you ready for this? He says, that's an interesting way to start your conversation. Sure, go ahead. And so I said, how'd you get out of your crisis? And he said, well, I'll let you know when I do. And so arguably this guy probably had a couple $100 million, maybe $500 million. I don't know, right? Whatever the number is, he had enough resources to be able to buy access to whatever he needed to get access to in order to solve the conundrum that he had, which is he didn't know what he was supposed to be doing with himself after he exited the company. To me, that led to a huge realization. One, I'd gone through the same things, but I didn't know what to call it. Two, there was no resources out there. I couldn't find any folks that were focused on this piece. And I understand why, but I couldn't find anybody that was really focusing on it. And so this slide says I'm having an existential crisis. And to me, this is your stereotypical founder or CEO who exits the company after scaling and getting a really big check. And I understand why folks aren't dealing with the problem. And it's not just advisors, it's people around the person that exits. I think many people believe it's less awkward to pretend that they don't know something's off with the person. I think most people don't want to admit that they're struggling, the founders that exited. I think the perception is that they should be happy. And so they try to act that out because if they say that they're sad, there's some admission of failure. The outcome when you're working on personal planning isn't linear. The success for in a lot of ways is subjective. And I think the last thing is you have to deal with feelings. And most people I know, I'm an engineer by training, right? Like feelings isn't something that is easy to measure. But in the same breath, like I think it's super important to realize that we're dealing with human beings and there are feelings. And just because somebody made a big business and had a huge exit, it doesn't mean that whatever problems that they're experiencing in their lives aren't real for them. And so I think, and we actually had this conversation during the Q&A in that session. He said, I don't want to sound tone deaf, but these are really first world problems. And nobody really cares if I'm not happy post exit, or I don't know what to do with my life post exit. And so one of the things that I love to ask folks is, are you comfortable exploring your client's feelings? Because if you're not, if you just want to get to the numbers, if you just want to deal with changing the org chart or improving the process, then you're going to naturally avoid this part of the plan. And I encourage you to bring somebody else in to support you if this isn't something that you want to deal with. It isn't efficient. Sometimes you feel like you're going backwards, but it is a very necessary step so you don't get, in some cases, to the altar and then the bride or the groom run away because they are terrified on what's going to happen when the business transacts. And I know that some of you have been left in a situation where you expected to close and the closing did not happen because they blew up on a term that didn't make any sense, but it was their way to ruin the transaction, to hijack it, to make sure that it didn't consummate so that they could keep the certainty that they were used to. And so he went on to say, man, nobody feels bad for you, right? You're rich. Nobody feels bad for you. And all I could think, because I saw the humanity in it, for him, it was, but I do feel bad for you. Like if you're suffering in silence, I feel bad. And I think there's a lot of other people who can understand why you feel the way you feel, especially if they've had an exit. And so what we think is the biggest problem in exit planning is most founders are exiting from instead of exiting to. So when you exit from, you exit into a void. You exit into the unknown. You exit into uncertainty. When you exit to, and this is why the plan is so important, you exit into your next, and whatever that is. You exit into building whatever the thing is. And the options are limitless, but what we know to be true is that you need a problem for them to solve, and we need the people that have that problem for them to solve it for. And if we can identify the people and the problem, people immediately have purpose. They have something to work towards, and they have significantly higher appreciation for being outside of their company and having the resources available in order to solve that problem. So what we like to say is, if you don't know where you're going, you won't like where you end up. This is the whole exiting from instead of exiting to, right? Where are you going post-exit? I love when people say, oh, I'm going to take a year off and figure out and see what comes. It's the perfect example of you don't know where you're going. And so you're just going to drift at sea for a year. Think about it. You're going to drift at sea for a year, and then, something's going to magically download towards to your brain and then you're going to be ready to do something. It's not actually how it works. And I believe intentionality is the most important thing that you can do when you're going through a transaction like this, because it is the thing that's going to give you certainty, clarity, and confidence. We've got a good friend named Rick Adelman. He built a financial advisory, registered investment advisory that had over 1 million clients. He sold it a couple of different times. I had him on our podcast and he was talking through what he went through when they sold. The same thing, what Rick talked about was the void, right? He talked about how everyone who acts is going to step into a void if they are not prepared by somebody who has been down this path before. And it was really interesting because he had multiple 9-figure exits from that company. So we've talked about the exit paradox and I introduced that, but this graphic, I think, is the best way that we found to share this concept, right? So there's the exit paradox, which is you got all this amazing stuff above the water, right? These are the things that people see. They see the freedom, they see the autonomy, the fulfillment, success, flexibility, satisfaction, wealth, opportunities, achievements. They see all that stuff, right? And then what they don't know, what they don't see is what we call the 6 centers of doubt. And so if you look at the lowest level, it starts with self-image, then goes to relationships, up to work, health, prosperity, and significance. These are the areas, these are the 6 areas where your clients are going to be asking the questions. And they actually progress from the bottom to the top. Right? Many people are like, oh, I'm just going to work on significance. I'm just going to donate. I'm just going to do impact stuff. Well, if you haven't become the person, if you don't have the self-image of a person that's done that, you won't be successful at the significance stuff. And so you've got to work through the self-image, become who you are in this new space. Then you move to relationships. And in those relationships, you really want to understand who you are with the people that you're interacting with. Because I think the changes are so dramatic and we won't have time to actually go through the activity where it's really easy to illustrate this. So I'll give you the punchline in a couple of slides, but relationships are the thing that I think drives home the point of personal planning. And we'll get to that in a couple of slides, right? Work. So what do you do with your new 40 or 60 hours a week once you're post-exit? Many people have loss of purpose and they say that's where the regret comes in. Health. Right. You can go from running all the time to not doing anything. And then all of a sudden you realize how tired you are or you were. The prosperity, we see a lot of people struggle with, and prosperity, we use prosperity intentionally because it's time, talent, and treasure, right? Many people just want to focus on the treasure, but the time I think is a more valuable resource because it's not renewable and the talent is unique to you. And so you can do things that not everybody else can do. And so your ability to allocate that resource is a huge deal. But if you don't have the company to use it in anymore, you struggle with, well, where is this valuable? And then the last one, significance, is what people talk about. It's legacy. It's, oh, my passion projects. People go through that all the time, but they don't realize that they have to go down to the deeper levels in order to make sure that they understand and are actually being the person they need to be in order to accomplish this other stuff. All right, so a little deeper on the 6 centers of doubt, right? So self-image, they ask questions like, who am I now that I've won the game? Relationships, are the relationships in my circle of trust genuine? What does work mean now that I no longer own a business and I'm work optional? We like work optional instead of retired. Did I give away too many years of my health to my business? And now what am I going to do about it? Or is it just a lost cause? Is there a reason I shouldn't spend the money, waste the time, and stop using my talent? I watch so many people struggle in the prosperity area because they're immigrants to the land of wealth. And then the last one, does my life really matter? And I see this more and more and more, where as people get closer to the end of life, they're asking the question, does my life matter? And so what I really would love to do if we have more time is do a really deep dive on relationships, But I'll just skip over the activity and we can revisit that at another point if you guys want. But the client signs the papers, the wire hits, and then everybody vanishes. They are Pablo on a swing by themselves. All the advisors are gone. Everybody's gone. Everybody got paid on the closing documents. Founder got their money. And the only person that might still be around is a financial advisor. Maybe. But for a lot of folks who are advisors, the business owner is not a great client, right? Because they're putting all their money back in the business. And so they might not even have a financial advisor. And so now they've had the exit event, and now all these people are showing up and they don't know who's friend, who's foe, who wants to help them, who just wants to take advantage of them. And so what I love to do, because most people are like, yeah, that's not true, Jerome, is I make them go through it. And so what we do is we have people list out the 5 folks that they spend the most time with. Some people tell me they don't have 5. Other people say, hey, it's my wife and my 4 kids, or it's my husband and my 3 kids and my girlfriend, like my best girlfriend. But everybody has 5 folks they spend the most time with. It's just a matter of if you're spending a lot of time with them or not. But go through your phone if you don't know. And if you still want to hold the point of you don't have 5, then just know that it takes 6 people to carry your casket. And so if you don't have 5 people you spend the most time with, you're probably not going to have 6 people to carry your casket. So once we have the 5 people, we rate them across 2 axes, capacity and contribution. Capacity is the ability to help. Contribution is how much they help. And the thought is that you want to have as many high capacity, high contribution people in your life as possible. Right? We call these relationships mutually beneficial because we know everybody that does an exercise like this is a high capacity, high contribution person in the relationships that they're spending their time. And there's others, I know I'll just talk about these 2 because they're opposites. And so a low contribution, low capacity relationship, we call that one draining. And what we find is that most apex performers, founders, people who are really successful have 40% of their folks above up here in high capacity and 60% down in low capacity, split between low and high contribution. In addition to that, we find that, and this is the punchline of the exercise, that of the 5 people, 3 of them are related to work. So imagine if 60% of the people that you spend time with on a daily basis were no longer in your life. What do you do? And that is the shock of loneliness that every founder that exits has to go through. Because if they want to go play golf in the middle of the day and the people that they used to work with are at work and they don't have a community of post-exit founders to hang out with, they're playing golf with themselves. And so they're finishing at 11 o'clock and then they're day drinking for the rest of the day. That gets old really quick for all the people that I know. And so we have to help our founders figure out who they're going to hang out with and spend time with on the backside of their exit. And it might seem like, hey, that's not a big deal. But I promise you it is, because the people you spend the time with are the people that enrich the experience the most. And so one more time, capacity is the ability to help. Contribution is how much you help. So I just want to revisit this one point. 100% of founders will exit. The question is, will you exit to excellence? Will you, as a business owner and advisor, exit to excellence? Will you help the people that you help exit to excellence? And notice that they're exiting to excellence. They're not exiting from excellence. It's great to do the value acceleration method on the business and make that business excellent. But what will they exit to? Not just from. I got to hang out with the shark. We were having dinner one night and I said, hey man, like, you've bought a bunch of businesses, you exited Fubu a couple of times. What is the deal? What is exiting to excellence in your opinion? He said, well, you want to do it on your terms, at your price. You want to know what's next and you want to be prepared for the void. I said, okay, that's consistent with everything else I've heard. He's like, yeah, if you can do those things, those 4 simple things, then you got it. You'll have a pretty successful exit. And so what is NEX, right? Because most people haven't heard that. So NEX is our process. It's a 4-step process that we created to help founders exit with clarity and confidence. And so the first thing that we do is we have founders nourish, which is a step that everybody wants to skip over. They don't want to figure out their true identity and their desires. They don't want to do the introspection and self-discovery. They don't want to peel away the layers of their last or past roles. They just want to move into the next thing. But they need to nourish themselves. They need to nourish their soul. For evaluation, you want to take inventory of the resources available to you. You got the time, talent, and treasure. You've got network. You've got all of the things that you've built over the years in order to make the business successful. Does that mean that you can only use them running that business? I humbly submit that no, the resources are available and they should be allocated because they're yours, not the businesses. The next thing you want to do, or another thing that you want to do when you're evaluating options on what to do next, is identify gaps. Well, here's the thing I'm thinking about doing, but here are the gaps that I have if I want to go do that. And you want to identify those gaps so you can decide whether you want to make or buy the solution for those issues. The next one is explore. And we had to get cute here, right? So we dropped the E. You want to chart the new paths. You want to rekindle passions. You want to really understand what gets the furnace going, man. Because there's nothing more rewarding in my experience than seeing the light come back on, right? Sometimes we talk to folks, we can't get to them before they exit. And so we end up spending time with them after the exit. And you see that the light turn off, that they're empty when you look in their eyes, that they feel lost. And so when we can turn that light back on, it's so exciting. It's so rewarding. It's, for me, more valuable than the money that we get from helping the folks. And then transcend. This is really stepping into that space. And if you remember Maslow's hierarchy of need, and I said there's a 6th level, transcendence is the 6th level. But this is where they're finding their fulfillment and purpose by working with the people that you identify and solving that problem for those folks. They're able to rise above societal expectation. And they're truly living life on their terms at that point because they have purpose and they're moving through that. This is where legacy is built. This is the only place where legacy is built. We wrote a book about your N.E.X.T. It was an Amazon bestseller. You hit the list. We were up there with some of the big guys. So this video, we won't be able to play it, but this is Rick talking about us and our process being different and explaining that nobody that he's talked to has done it in the way that we do it. And he believes that the work is really valuable, and we can send that soundbite out if anybody's interested in hearing it. So I like to make this personal because while I talked about the $2 billion exit or double unicorn exit, part of the reason why this work was so important for me is because I experienced it, but also I was watching my dad go through it. And so he was coming to a place where he was ending his formal get paid for work career or part of his life. And he was like, well, I don't know what I'm gonna do next. And so he had a buddy who was doing yard work. Now, mind you, my dad's in his 60s. He had a buddy that was doing yard work. He's like, oh, well, I guess I'll go do yard work. And so I'll never forget him showing up at my house and having a scar on his cheek because he fell off a ladder because he was cutting bushes. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, man, I can't sit still. I got to do something. And he didn't have a plan for his next. And so we started talking, we started working together, and he was doing some volunteering. And I was like, ooh, well, what do you really want to do? He's like, man, I've been a public servant my entire career from when I was 17 when I joined the Marines. I was like, okay. He said, eventually we got to a place where he's like, hey, I'm gonna become the mayor of the town we live in. And so a year ago, this was one of his first initiatives. He got sworn in February. And in May, they had the first Memorial Day parade that they had in 25 years. And it was his brainchild, and it was bringing life back into the city because it's a pretty small town. I cry every time I look at this picture, and probably this one more because he asked me to hold the Bible when he was getting sworn in as mayor. And so what I will say is every one of you and every client that you have should know what their N.E.X.T is. And if you don't, we've got the tools to help you do it, right? We've got the process, we've got the books, we've got the assessments, we've got all of the things that you need in order to guide your clients and yourself to that place so that you can have a fulfilling post-exit experience. Dana, this is in Clarkton, North Carolina. And believe it or not, he was the first Black mayor and first Black postmaster in that town. So that is the end of my content. I encourage everybody to connect with me on LinkedIn. I think that's the fastest and most efficient way to do it. And it allows us to see what everybody's got going on. I saw Eric's question, and I don't know if you want to read them or I can go through them. Totally up to you.
Yeah, I can go through them. We have a number of questions that came in, a lot of compliments on the presentation, Jerome, and a lot of thanks for presenting this. First, let's start with Jared has a question. He says, hi, Jerome, very interesting perspective. When you say be ready or comfortable to explore your client's feelings, what if the client, him or herself, is someone who's completely closed when it comes to feelings?
I would offer that they are closed because they haven't been in a space where it's okay to have that conversation and they don't feel comfortable being vulnerable. What I do know is that all of them are experiencing it, and you just have to pierce the layer so that you're in that circle. The way that I like to describe it is you want to be in the first 3 phone calls when something good happens and the first 2 phone calls when something bad happens. And if you're in that space, they're going to tell you what's going on with them. And sometimes you have to be vulnerable yourself in order to get them to open up because they are putting on a facade. But if the person won't take off the mask, it's, from my perspective, impossible to help them.
Great. Next question
And
came
I
in,
don't,
Jerome. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. No, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say one more thing. And I don't think you can actually help them if you don't know what they're worried about or what they fear. And that, from my perspective, once you get to the fear stuff, all of the other stuff is pretty easy to deal with from a feeling perspective.
Got it. The next question came in, Jerome, from David. What is the definition of capacity and contribution in the exercise that you mentioned?
Yeah, I tried to gather that while I was still on the slide, but capacity is your ability to help somebody do what they're working on. Contribution is how much you help them. And so think about it like this. Does the person get their fingers and fingernails dirty when you're working on something, or do they just watch you? And that's contribution. From a capacity standpoint, do they have a Rolodex? Do they have capital? Do they have whatever missing resource you may have or may be looking for? And are they willing to use that resource or allocate that resource to help you on your way?
Got it. And then we circle back to that question again from Eric, Jerome, about do you do any personality profiling to help founders understand themselves, DISC or some other tool?
So I'm really glad that Eric asked that question. So we created something called the NEO assessment. And the NEO assessment is independent of any other personality assessment. There's 6 archetypes that we believe founders have. They're either a Neo, Morpheus, Trinity, Architect, Oracle, or Agent Smith. And each one of those archetypes tells you how you're going to encounter the 6 centers of doubt. And so we want them to understand how they're going to experience it. For instance, if somebody is an Agent Smith, when they are working through their self-image, they're going to be very tenacious. They're not going to have a lot of compassion with themselves as they're working through moving into the new person that they're becoming. And we do it for each level. And then on the backside of that report, they actually get some recommendations on things that they should be doing in order to move into what we would call a fulfilling post-exit life.
Great. Next question came from Joe. General question, you probably get this a lot, Jerome, is how does a wealth advisor implement this into their practice?
Yeah, so what I've found, and I've coached a lot of advisors over the years, what I've found with the advisors is you're putting together a plan to pay for things that the founders want to do post exit to make sure that they don't run out of money. And many advisors just want to stop there. But the reality from my perspective is you if you don't help them come up with a plan for what their life is going to look like, whatever aim you have is going to vanish because they're going to use it because they're bored. They don't know what to do. And so they're going to entertain themselves with the money, or they're going to take the money out and make bad investments because now they're VCs in industries that they have no understanding or expertise in. And so I think there's a lot of incentive for advisors to do it. Now, to get directly to your question, how do you introduce it? I think one, and this might sound self-serving, but encourage your client to check out our podcast, Your Next, because it's going to give them ideas on things that they can do, and it doesn't cost anybody anything except time. If you want to go deeper, you can give them a copy of one of our books. We've got Your Next and Exiting to Excellence, and they can read those books. If they want to go even deeper and they want like a guided plan, we can go together and do what we call the Next Intensive with them, where we go through the 6 centers of doubt, figure out a plan for each one of those things, and really help them get clarity on what to do next. And so it's just a matter of at what level that you want to get involved. But the most important thing you can do is ask them, so what are you going to do next? That's the most important question that you can ask them. And if they don't have clarity around that, then offering them some education, whether it's from us or somebody else, so that they can start to do some self-discovery and create the plan on their own if that's what they want to do, or connect them with the resource that can help them create the plan, I think is the best part. I don't think that you have to become a person that's focused on personal planning. I think you just have to be aware that personal planning is really important and that you're going to lose the A if you don't help them make sure that they have a solid personal plan.
Great. Jerome, next question from Craig. This might relate to the 3 gates that we talk about Chris's methodology: discover, prepare, decide. When do you begin to prepare a post-exit plan with your business owner?
So I think it begins in discover, and you're just asking the question, what do you plan to do next? Because if the person doesn't want to move to something else, it's likely that you're going to have big challenges when it gets time to close. And I think it happens in the beginning. So one of the things we like to say is you want to begin with the end in mind. For me, it's baffling for me for somebody to say, I did an exit plan. And then we ask, well, what's the person going to do post exit? And they say, I don't know. That's not my job. And it's like, well, how did you optimize the transaction to get the person the highest likelihood of having the post exit life that they want? We're optimizing for post exit. We're not optimizing for the transaction, because the person has to live in the post exit world. They don't live in the transaction.
Yeah. Great point on that. And a couple questions, Jerome, if you could remind again the name of your book. We have a number of people interested in. Is your book available on Audible?
So we have an audiobook version. It's not on Audible, but on our website, you can get access to the audio version of our book. You have to go to exitexcellence.com, and under resources, you'll see books. So the first book is Exit to Excellence. Well, it's the second book, but it's the most recent release, Exit to Excellence. And it's basically a case study. And so we take somebody through the process of their post-exit, finding post-exit fulfillment, like what we recommended for this particular person. And then the first book is Your Next. Your Next really just dives into what's it going to feel like after I sell my company, when I don't have emails and my phone's not ringing and I don't have a calendar full of meetings. Like, what should I expect? And then it walks through N.E.X. and T so that people understand what each one of those phases looks like. So Your Next, and then Exit to Excellence is the other book.
Perfect. Thank you. I know we have a lot of people interested in that, Jerome. Question from Thomas is, how much time, in your opinion, money should business owners allocate to the third leg of the stool? The same as the other legs, more or less? Thomas finds that getting time with these busy people is always a factor.
Yeah, the time is something that is going to be necessary. And from my perspective, some folks are going to come in and they're not going to want anything to do with it. They're not going to want to talk about the third leg of the stool. They're going to tell you that they're going to figure it out on their own. And that's okay, right? Because in the end, it's always the client's choice. But what I would say from a investment standpoint, it's a, probably a, so one of the things we say is, hey, 3% of revenue on your business is 1 to 3% of revenue of the business is what I think people should be spending annually on development. And so this fits into the development bucket for me.
And then a question came in, Jerome. This is an interesting one. Generationally, we know baby boomers are set to exit the next 5 years, a mass exodus, and we see that lifestyle business owner with the baby boomers where it's really hard to separate the identity from the work. Are you seeing more awareness with millennials, Gen X, with the founders paradox, or is this across all generations in your opinion?
Yeah, I don't think anybody really gets it until they exit. And it's really difficult, if I'm totally honest, to convince somebody to make an investment in planning what you're going to do next, because we're programmed to believe that the money is going to solve all the problems. Like, we're programmed to believe that once you get enough money, nothing else is a problem. The issue is you can't solve these problems with money. And so for the folks, and the younger folks are seeing tech exits, so it's more common for them than the baby boomers. When people are doing those businesses where they keep them for 3 to 7 years, the attachment isn't there in the same way that the attachment exists for somebody that's 15 to 50 years. And so from an awareness standpoint, what you'll see is the 3 to 7 year founders are just going to build another business. Like, I think Elon Musk is the perfect example of it. Like, it's just like, oh, I'm going to take PayPal and roll it into Tesla. I'm going to take Tesla and roll it into SpaceX. I'm going to take SpaceX and Tesla and roll it into Twitter. Like, he's just rolling it into a new thing. Is he making a difference? I don't know. Does he feel like he's making a difference? I'm sure he does at some points. But what I know that I've seen more recently is just the focus on relationships. He went from a guy who didn't care about relationships to taking his kid into the Oval Office. Like, there's just so much difference in that approach. And so, to be clear, it doesn't matter how much money somebody has. Everybody's seeking to make their life matter.
Yeah.
Everybody's seeking to make their life matter.
Yeah. Great point, Jerome. We've got a lot of compliments again on the presentation. Some say it's one of our best we've done. So kudos to you. And I'm going to allow you kind of final comments and allow you to offer, again, to connect to individuals that want to learn a little bit more. I know LinkedIn's an opportunity there, but any final comments for our SEPA community?
Man, I really hope that people will go out and act against this thesis that we've put out there, because if we do this, that 75% of people who regret exiting is going to drop dramatically, because I think we're actually solving the problem. And I've been around a lot of different communities, and everybody is focused on the money. And great, we help the person make more money. But if I go back to my buddy who was in his business for 47 years, he had 30, like, the exit was 50 million plus. He was entitled to over 30 million of that. He already probably had 10 to 15 million saved, and he's trying to optimize for another 5. Right. And so when I think about that, I just feel sad, because he's in his 70s. Right. He's going to spend his last days trying to figure out how to make another 5 million because of an earnout, when he's got a framework, he's got a philosophy, he's got the people and the problem to go out and solve that. But instead, he's wasting 40 hours a week trying to convince people to give him the money that he feels like he deserves or he's entitled to. And there's so many other people who are desperate for him to show up and be the person that they need to lead them into that new space that they're seeking and searching for.
Wonderful. Well, again, our community, SEPA community, greatly appreciates your time and expertise in this, Jerome. I know your LinkedIn's on there, so you have a number of people wanting to connect. Again, for our Credential Plus members, you'll be able to watch the replay of this in the Member Center resources. For all of you who have attended, thank you for joining us. Thank you again, Jerome, for your time on this. We greatly appreciate it, and we look forward to our next webinar and think tank. Take care, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Bye.